One thing I've learned, if you don't hold their feet to the fire, everybody gets burned.
Hold on. Before you start waving around that freedom of speech thing, when you're in a crowded movie theater and you scream fire, you better be able to smell smoke. You come on this radio show and you start saying incandescent things like that, you better have more behind you, pal, than just your thumb. I've been listening to talk radio for years, and one thing I just can't stand is when the host has to, push his way on the people, beat the callers into his way of thinking, extending his ego. Or when the callers call in and say something so outrageous, and the host lets it go unchallenged. The sign you're on the road to truth is the lack of contradiction. You want to find truth, you just don't simply believe somebody because of their authority or their degree, or you listen to what they say, you test it against reality, and you hold their feet to the fire.
All right, we're back live. Feet to the fire. I'm your host, James, off the Yanchik, the Black Knight of Talk Radio into year 20. And I'm doing this live, but last week we had a little trouble with the live. And the internet is becoming very unfriendly these days. I don't know if it's me personally or if it's general, but and if it keeps doing it, I'll just record it because not a lot of people chime in here on chat anyway. They come in to say hi, but that's fine. And most of the time I'm busy keeping my train of thought going, off keeping it on the tracks and not even paying attention. So there we go. I talk a lot about Jesus' words, and I'm not an evangelist. I'm not proselytizing, nor am I a prophet. What I have come to determine that Jesus' words had very important meanings to our life, success in life, and our success in afterlife. There's redemptive powers and life-changing powers in that I felt myself. I can't explain it. I can't prove it. I guess you could prove it by seeing changes in people's lives. And so I'm not going. I don't ever focus on, if you don't belong to a particular creed or what have you, that these guys are wrong, these guys are right. I don't get into that. I'm doing into it. It's more than philosophy. It's philosophical, spiritual understanding what was being taught and how it applies to me. And thus, I share that with you. So there's going to be things that you probably hear which you've never heard before, some things you did. Other things are going to be, hey, that's pretty interesting. Other things, I don't like that, and that's fine. Because everyone has to make their own choices. They have to understand and come to a closer relationship with God and have it be transparent into life. Align yourself with the energies for the life to come so that you get, you go to and are included in Kingdom of Heaven, as Jesus taught many times. And it's not just about getting out of hell, which is most of religion, Christianity anyways, most of it is getting out of hell. But it's more than that. It's a getting aligned with the next life hereafter, which is, we don't know. It's too complicated. It's beyond our understanding. So to actually describe it literally is fruitless. but to the principles are shareable. Anyway, what I was thinking about is the phrase "for my sake." I have found that, again, I've grown up through various Christian sects. Baptist, probably my most studied within the context, and I learned a lot from that. Lutheran, I was before that, United Church of Christ. I even went into the New Age after that and rediscovered everything myself using lack of contradiction, which should be points to truth. And I have kind of rediscovered things from the various areas and have my own package that I follow. And hypocrisy is the most thing Jesus talked about. So the idea is that you want to understand what is going on and then actually live it out. And that's my whole point. And this is what I do these little talks about what Jesus says. And I don't claim it as some kind of arbitrary authority or some type of prophecy giving me information, though I would hope and pray, and it seems to me that I'm being guided to find these things and then point out things in my life that need to be changed, and it's always been for the better. So anyway, this particular time, I wanted to talk about the phrase "for my sake," because what it appears to me is that people think when they make a stand for Jesus or for Christianity, it means like making a confession of faith, like Jesus is my Savior, and that's what making a stand for Christianity is, rather than denying God, denying Jesus' work and his redemptive plan. And while that's true, I mean, that's true, but it's too limited. And the way I find things is as you study the things that Jesus taught, and I focus on what Jesus said, not the narrative of the New Testament, not the Old Testament, but what Jesus said, because as far as I would understand, by definition, Jesus did come to fulfill the law, and the way that reads to me is he's come to explain what it really is. It's been corrupted over the years. As with all power structures, psychopaths and whatever still are corrupted. So Jesus came to actually not only clarify it in his teachings, but actually live it out. So that's why I think it's very important to understand what he says. So I have put my effort in understanding these things, to understanding Jesus' teachings, the red letters, if you will. So what I want to start first is here's an example. There's several examples of "for my sake" and all that, but I grabbed one here. "For whosoever shall save his life shall lose it, but whosoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it." That's Mark 8:35. Now, I like that one because it says, "and the gospels," other quotations "for my sake." And I thought that was very interesting, that extra part, and I will go into it as I went along here. So when I get this stuff, I get like an itch, I get like a leading, I was like, oh, there's something there. I get like an itch, something there, and it kind of, and I've been thinking about this as I've been driving. There's something there, and I wanted to actually go and dig into the words and then look up the Greek behind it and see the different stuff. So I did that. And one of the things when I read it, again, when I read these things, there's things that are like highlighted. How you take that little yellow highlighter and when you're reading that, your eyes are drawn to that. Well, that's happens to me internally. So the phrase "for my sake" is the main thrust here. But when I look at this and say, whoever he wants to save his life shall lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospels will save it. Now, reading the English version, you look at it and go, okay, those who are living for material gain, for safety, I'm gonna live for my physical needs, and I'm going to put that as my main focus, mammon, if you will, serving mammon, if you will, the materialism. But when I looked up the word "life" in there, I was, again, I got an itch and I scratched, and what I came up with was, where is it? Where is life? Okay, I guess I got to re-click on it again. Oh, here it is. All right. So, when I looked up life, it started to show other verses that contained that the Greek word for life. Now, it's like the way I would say it in English would be psychen, Psychen. That, I guess, would be the English transliteration of the word. And I thought about that. Ooh, psych, psychology and all this stuff. I mean, obviously those words come from the Greek. They don't explain the Greek. They take them from the Greek. So, but I started looking at other verses. Who sought the child's life and are dead? It's a little quote. I'm not going to give the whole verse because I just want to get the point life. Another example of this is and this is one we talked about, to kill the soul. But actually, we're going to get to that one next. And destroy both soul and body in hell. So that word soul is translated in many versions in other areas, King James included. So the same word behind it. So if you want to go back and read that, whoever wants to save his soul will lose it. But whoever loses his soul for my sake, well, that doesn't sound right. There's something there, but it doesn't sound right. It's like, oh, wait a minute. So I started looking up the word body, because you got body and soul, right? So the word body is soma. That's how it would be said in English transliteration. And that appears many times, for your whole body to be thrown into fire, lake of fire, the lamp of the body, so then the light of the body is the eye. You see, we got that. So the word soma, the body, that is the physical human, right? So I looked up the word spirit. I have to find it now. Because I'm thinking, okay, you got the soul and you got the spirit. And I remember, I think it was Paul who said something that knows how to, he can separate the soul and the spirit or something like that. But the spirit is pneuma, and I knew that. Pneuma is really like a breath, wind. Theopneumatos, the Greek word, means God inspired. Inspiration is kind of what we're looking for. So the idea of the spirit is God breathed in. If you recall, in Genesis, it talks about God breathing in spirit in the human. That was Hebrew, but the same kind of concept. So we go back to that original deal here, and we got whoever loses his life, which is kind of like your soul, or save his life, and lose it. And then we go to that other verse that says, don't be afraid of those who kill the body, soma, but are able to kill the soul. I forgot the word already. That's the one we were talking about. The soul, which is psychen. Okay. Don't be afraid to lose the body. Do not be afraid to those who kill the body, soma, but are unable to kill the soul, psychen. And I'm thinking, okay, we got the word soul, meaning, your soul lives on beyond you, and yet somehow you could lose it when you try to save it. And so as I continued going on, it made more depth, more sense. So I looked up in spirit. Jesus was led up by the Spirit, pneuma. And another one, Jesus was baptized, and the heavens were open. He saw the Spirit of God descending as a dove, the pneuma of God, the inspiration of God, the breathing in of God. And so when I put those all together, I got another one here, pneuma, okay. Okay. So I put them all together, and how I would say this is that there is, the way I'm looking at the psychen, all right, rather than say the word soul, I would say that the lichen, or the life that's in that verse, is the animating force of the human, not just the body, heartbeat, whatever. It's the spiritual animation of the person and staying alive by that animation. And so it's whoever wants to save the staying aliveness, staying animatedness, if you focus on that, like I'm going to avoid these problems because I want to stay animated. I want to stay alive and animated. You will lose that. But whoever loses that animation for my sake will save it. So if you lose it, how do you save it? Well, this is where we go into the kingdom of heaven, the next life. Your animation will continue on. It will not leave because you don't die. And it's other verses throughout the Jesus talking about those who believe shall not perish but have everlasting life. So you don't actually die. So you have the body may die, but the animating force continues on. And so how is that different than the soul? I mean, I did a video a long time ago, if I can find it, that I broke down what I thought the body, spirit, and soul was. And I'll put that up there to answer that question. But now we go back to, okay, whoever wants to save his animation will lose it, but those who will lose the animation will save it, right? So what is for my sake? Because that's the gist of this aspect of it. So let me find out. Let's look at the blessed are the poor in spirit again. We have that word spirit, which is pneuma. And if we look up to that, blessed are the poor in spirit, it has that same word, that breath and inspiration. So you say, blessed are those who are not inspired or have a weak spiritual. No, so there's another application to that word pneuma, and that's where I think the ego comes in. So blessed are those who have a less powerful ego, the humility of less powerful ego. There's the kingdom of heaven. So you see how you can get in there and get a whole, if you were to, it takes too many words to say that, so you can't call it a translation. They call it I forgot the word they call it, where they kind of expound on it while they're translating it. So it all kind of makes sense, but where's about the my sake? And when I looked up the original, I got to go back to the whole list of sakes. Here we go. Whoever will save his life will lose it. Whoever loses life will save it for my sake. And then Mark says, for my sake and the gospel. When you look at the word gospel, we all know the gospel means good news, right? But, or glad tidings. The problem is, I think the gospel has been redefined by churches over the centuries, millennia. So the gospel is really the whole good news of God and man. But God is here with man. And for my sake is Jesus taught. And it goes on. Just read Matthew 5, go through the whole Sermon on the Mount. He taught how to live properly, how to be holy, what really means, not bragging, not doing earthly stuff, church stuff, whatever. It's actually living it out and actually helping the good Samaritan, helping people out. When somebody asks you something, give them, walk for a mile, walk with them too. All these approaches that Jesus talked about actually living in that life, that was his point. So I'm saying that his sake would be if you do something because Jesus taught this principle, you're doing it for his sake. His sake was to come here and teach us this stuff, to put in effect a regenerating, a rebuilding of the person, to go on to that resonating with the spirit in heaven of the kingdom of heaven. So for his sake, it's not simply to confess his name. In fact, Jesus, I wish I would have thought about it. See, I like doing this because I'm doing it on the fly, but I can't sit and look up the verses. But Jesus said before about if you don't do it, If you don't have the physical aspects of what we're teaching here, then it doesn't matter. James was big on it. If you tell somebody go warm and get filled, what good is it? You got to supply their physical needs. So the idea here is we have to go out and do these things actively in the world, and that's doing it, knowing it's taught by Jesus, and we're doing these things. We're doing it for His sake. So it's not like you're going to stand up and confess Jesus as your Lord to the evil atheist tyranny who will then cut you down. Well, yeah, okay, that's an aspect of it. But people, Jesus also said, let your light shine before men so that they will give glory to God, who is your Father. The idea is that you, by living your life and doing these things, you don't have to say anything. If people are going to say, why does he do that? He's being a nice guy. And if they ask you for things, you can tell them, well, I'm just following what Jesus said because it changed my life and so on. So the my sake is broader than simply naming oneself as a Christian. It is doing what Jesus would do. You talk about the phrase, God being God with skin on. That's what we are, is God with skin on. Even in Genesis, it talked about how let us make man in our image, and then God gave man dominion on earth and all the inhabitants on it. In their image, in God's image. So are we going around through life as God with skin on? And are we doing things as God would do it if he was here? You see, these are the things we got to ask ourselves, because we can get really complacent by in self-righteousness, and we can look at the Pharisees and go, yeah, they're self-righteous, not by me. But we have our own way of self-righteousness. We have our own methods of doing what they did in our area. So that when you do something for Jesus' sake, it is because you're imitating what he says. You follow Jesus' commandments. You follow his teachings. You're doing it for his sake. And that's where the problem, I think, comes in life a lot of times is, and we're forced to deal with it now, is my own personal opinion is we're going into the later days. And I don't know how long that'll be. But so we're going to be put in a position where we're going to actually have to step out and make a stand in action, deeds, words, in the spirit, in our heart, and so forth. I mean, we're seeing the sexual fetishes and perversions are being equated with, the being non-hate or love. Sexual fetishes, you can't make that into a right or a mandate that other people have to agree with it. I mean, this is what's happening. There's going to be a point where they're killing children up to birth that would never have flown 20 years ago. Maybe in quiet it might have. They're doing that. They're having all kinds of they're having kids with drag queens and kids with sex changes and all this stuff, which they're not even, by definition, kids are protected from that because they don't have the maturity to deal with this. And now they're wanting to do this stuff and making states that are going to be children sex change safety states. It's ridiculous. And so this is where there's a point where you're going to have to not sit on the sideline. Now, it doesn't mean that you go, do any violence, because Jesus never said do violence. In fact, I'm struggling. I have a problem with a lot of the talk I hear from Christian nationalists in terms of we're going to have to fight. They're talking about reenacting the old knights going to Jerusalem. Gosh, it's great that I'm talking, huh? I see the knights going down to Jerusalem to turn them, and I can't think of the phrase. Anyway, so you're looking at terms like we're going to have to fight for Jesus. Jesus did not fight. Resist the devil and he will flee. Not fight the devil. Not fight it. Now, So, well, what about somebody breaks in your house? And it's different. When somebody attacks you, you fight back. But this is the thing. This is the thing that is going to be difficult. It's hard to explain in a objective sense, to learn intellectually, to learn through your head. This is something that's learned through the inside. And that when you give your life down for someone else, it's the ultimate sacrifice. When you defend the innocent, that is ultimate. But if you're going to go fight for overturning corruption, I don't know what to say. I don't have the background in Jesus' teachings for that. People go to, people run to Jesus for mercy, and they run to this Old Testament when they want to kick ass, is what it comes down to. So the whole idea here, for my sake, I understand, is doing what Jesus said in life as you leave. That is following his sake. And if it comes down to you lose your animation for his sake, you continue to be animated, and you move into kingdom because of the saving grace, as well as you're preparing yourself for the level by using. Actually, God's preparing you, and you're going along with it. It's funny. It's not like I'm doing something to earn salvation. That's the big thing that gets thrown if you start talking about your behavior. It's the whole concept of salvation by grace, and by growing and changing into a person who is spiritually aligned with the kingdom of heaven. That's all God working on you. All we have to do is go along with it. Jesus, the humans, his greatest thing that he did was allow God to work through him. Whatever God wanted, he did. He was obedient, even unto death. I like that phrase. Even when it came to his death, he could have said, hey, and used his own powers to knock back the Romans, but it wasn't part of the plan. It was to show that you follow the principles that Jesus taught. He lived his own principles. He learned it. And you follow it even if it comes to your death. Even if it comes to you losing out on certain things. There's another verse that comes up that if you, for people who lose houses and homes and families for following Jesus for his sake, you'll gain many, many more times. Here we go. Luckily, I still have this here. Truly, I say to you, there is no one who has left house, brothers or sisters or mother or father, or children or farms for my sake and for the gospel's sake, but he will receive 100 times as much now in the present age, which is the pre-kingdom of heaven, and in the age to come, eternal life, moving into the kingdom of heaven. So if you're afraid of losing stuff, the thing is, if you lose them, you will gain more of what you really need. And if you've lost what you really need, you would gain the stuff back. But again, focusing forward now and then. But it's the idea of my sake means following his principles, not confessing his name. It's following the teachings. It's like it comes back to me. There's a parable that says the guy says the father says to go do something to his sons. One son goes, yeah, I'll go do it. And he doesn't do it. The other one says, no, I'm not going to do it. And then he changed his mind and went and did it. Who did the will of the Father? So you have this for my sake means go out and do it. And if it's hard, you pray to God to change you. And he does, because it does. It's like there's a great little piece in it, Holy Grail movie with the Indiana Jones. His mind, his father was dying. He had to go get the Holy Grail. His eyes were saying he's going to fall into a cavern. The notes left behind him by the other knights said to go out and step out in faith, and he had no choice but did it. And it turns out it was an optical illusion, and there was a solid bridge there. Now, I know it's a movie and everything like that, but the point is a good point. You go out in faith and do what's supposed to happen, and the guarantee is not that you'll get what you want or what won't happen, what you think, is that God is there guiding the situation so that all things come to good for those who love God and who are called according to his purposes. And I like to phrase it, who will hear his voice and follow, is how I would put it if I was the one saying it. And so doing it for his sake, you're here, you see the words, you're following the principles, you're doing it for his sake, and you're not going to lose your animation. And if you do, you don't, you know, when you die, you don't die. I mean, I haven't been there. There's people who have had near-death experiences. I don't think it's the same thing. It's probably a dumbed-down version of it for our minds. But when you die, you don't die. You keep going. And whether it's evil or good, you still keep going on. But the idea is that if you follow the principles of Jesus, when you die, you go on and into the kingdom of heaven. So you got this moving, nicely through it. And that's why I maintain people should read read Jesus' words, listen to. I mean, I had one thing I did right in my life was a long time ago. In the 90s, I started listening to Bible on tape. I still got them too. I wore out a few tapes, and I turned around and bought the DVD or CD version of it. NASB Bible, I like. I think the translation, they do a really good job of trying to make best they can what it says in English, and using many manuscripts to put it together. So I've listened to it a gazillion times. And so now the stuff's in my head. And Jesus said that he's going to send the helper to bring to mind all the things I've said. Well, here it is. Stuff's coming to my mind. I'm talking to you. I'm using my brain, and I'm using a lot of it these days, to talk to you. I'm not carousing through the verses in my mind, but yet they come to my mind. And the system is set up to do this. And it's all my doing of this stuff is for Jesus' sake, which is for my sake. That's the kind of the falsity that the world, whether it be the world or devil or whatever, gives you, is you've got to give up all this stuff to become be a Christian or follow God. And you don't have to do that if you follow mammon or materialism, mammon or Satan or whatever. You don't have to give up nothing. You can have it all. You're not giving up anything when you're following Jesus' teachings, when you're following his sake. You're not giving up anything, because what you're giving up is destruction of yourself. It's like, hey, you could drink this potion and it's really good, but then you die from the poison effects of it. But boy, felt really good at that moment. Whereas when you move on into the next level, when you move on into the kingdom of heaven, words cannot describe in our terms the peace, joy, and happiness that's there. And this is where faith comes in. Faith is having faith in something that you can't really see. You get a little touch of, you get some ideas about it. But your faith is going forward to that day when you will open up after you die, your soul and your human psyche, your human life opens up into the soul, into the greater energy. And wow, right? Now, I mean, I've had a few dreams where I've had just a touch of it trying to get through into my head to kind of understand the limits that we have here as conscious humans. And it's there for our protection, because look what's going on in the world now. How all evil abounds. What happens if they would have that extra abilities and energies? This would become hell. And this is what hell is actually going to be, is people who are of that mindset of power, control, and all this stuff. They're all going to go to a higher level. Well, one would say lower level. And they're going to have all this power and control, and it's going to be hell. This is how I would put it if I was putting out if I was going to describe the indescribable that's waiting for us, both, we'll say good and bad. This is how I would put it. So if you're giving up anything that's harmful to you, it's to your credit. It's to your ability. You will grow from it in this life and afterwards. You give up drinking or drugs because it messes with your mind, body, and soul. You lose that here. You gain a better conscious. I mean, I've experimented with drugs when I was younger, and I have a greater consciousness understanding now, completely not having it for many, many decades, I have developed, and I think this is what the bad part about drugs is that they stunt your spiritual development in terms of higher consciousness. And that would make sense. The devil would want you to get it here now in this lower area and stop your growth into that higher area. When you're promiscuity with sex, you're missing the unique bond that you would have with your spouse, where you would grow in that bond only with them, and it becomes a greater, beautiful thing. And if you go out and are promiscuous, you actually harm and degrade the physics of the spirit and the physical that will not allow that. You blunt that, and you get lower and lower and lower, and you get more and more and more base. The same thing with drinking alcohol. Same deal. It causes your mind to go into a lower energy state beyond your normal consciousness, rather than working up toward the other one. You deal with demons and angels and so-called angels and stuff like the same deal. You're developing a relationship with talking to lower beings, and God doesn't talk to lower beings. I mean, it's God speaks through you. I mean, when I get ideas pop in my head to go look up, and I take the emotional and the spiritual and the physical, and they're going to coordinate. They're going to ground what you think. People say, well, my truth, and they can say anything, right? There was this guy who was talking about galactic history, and he just says, millions of years ago, you guys were on another planet, another time, that's why you're here together. He's just saying stuff. I mean, I would think that it's very creative of this person to be able to do these things, and there may be animation from the other side that's helping them, deluding them, whatever to do it, but how does it help you now? So if you had a reading for somebody, a million years ago we were on a planet, two planets were fighting, we were on each, my girlfriend and me, or vice versa, were on the other planets, and we suffered, and so now we're coming in this life to work it out. What has that got to do with anything? How is that going to be different? I mean, you're supposed to, if you're together and you're in a relationship, you work it out. You don't need to know that a million years ago you were on other planets fighting. You see what I mean? Now, something may come from this. The persons may decide to actually make a decision and work it out, but it's just a story. And this is why I stick to the principles of Jesus' teaching, because if I follow his sake, excuse me, I get real things. Real things happen. All right, so I think I'm going to cut it there, because I don't, we're doing good. Everything's working at this point. I got my point across, I hope. I apologize. I'm not really smooth at doing this stuff. But most of my personal thing is stream of consciousness. This stuff comes as I'm talking. Now, if you were actually writing this stuff down and trying to make this into a transcript, I saw one time, God bless the person, they made a transcript for the guest, and I was reading my own transcript. I go, oh my God, this guy can't do one sentence without 18 parenthetical expressions. And I apologize for that, but this is how my mind works. So if you can appreciate that or get through that, that's great, And I'm willing to share what I find with you, and you could do whatever you want with it. And the problem with a lot of stuff I'm sharing is that the areas like YouTube and others are along with this supporting these sexual fetishes and preborn infanticide and all these things. And if you say anything about that, now you're hate speech. Now, I don't understand this. How can somebody want to have little kids have to go through chemical stuff when they don't even know what it is to be, a boy or a man or a woman or about a girl yet? How is that not hate for the child? And killing the preborn is not hate, but somebody saying that you shouldn't do that is hate, and that's because we're in an upside down world. And I think we're in the latter days, so it's less. we have less time to fool around. We got to get our act together, because when the final whistle blows, you can't go like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, now I'll get serious, you know. And to me, right, I'm looking around at my life right now, there's a lot of stuff I want to do. I mean, if you saw the mess the studio is in. But to me, it's like it doesn't matter as much. It is aggravating when I try to find something and step on and knock things over. But it's like the point is to focus on these principles, apply them to my life, pray for God for his regeneration and doing, and it helps. I've recently stopped eating any kind of sugar, no sugar whatsoever, and I've limited my simple carbs in general, but mostly simple ones, down to, I think about 50 a day. What a difference in my physical life. I mean, I've not only lost weight, I feel good. It's because those are toxins. Sugar's a toxin. Alcohol's a toxin. Excitotoxins, like aspartame and glutamine and all those, glutamate, all these things are toxins that harm your body. Of course, obviously, marijuana and various other drugs, fentanyl, they cause problems, and fentanyl causes death very easily. They're harming your system. And when you do that, you're going to have your perception will be dimmed. And many a person who have been hopelessly hooked on heroin and stuff, they went to God and said, I can't take it anymore, help me, and they've turned around. But the flaw is that you think you can't do it. I mean, I'll give you an example of my own life. I mean, this way I'm not offending anybody. I was knocked out with COVID. The COVID wasn't the worst part. Is that I developed this ability where I went to go to sleep, I'd wake up gasping. It was a psychological effect for me focusing on the oxygen level of my body, which I even had a faulty device. So, and I was off work. I spent the money that we had for savings, just about all of it. I was so weak I can go from one room to another. And I'm thinking, how am I going to get back to work? And I was laying in bed. That's it. It's over. I'm going to go bankrupt. I'm going to lose everything. And inside me, I just felt like, wait a minute, God brought me to this point now. He's not going to let me go. And I said, I'm going to go forward and follow direction on what to do, regardless of how bad it looks. Like, I couldn't hardly walk from one room to the other. And I'm supposed to go drive a truck safely, of course. And from that moment on, I just followed what was popping in my head, followed the guidance of it. And I went to the doctor. He okayed it. I went to work. I was very weak. My company was understanding. They gave me some, I don't know if they gave me or for God, the king's heart is in the hand of God. So I don't know if they were, dispatcher's heart was being, but I worked my way back and I made it. I made it from absolute hopelessness and only relying on God and faith in him to get me through this, through it. Now, this happened several times throughout my life in areas I saw no hope for destruction. And here I am. Here I am standing here, or actually sitting here. So this is the point that I'm saying. When you find out, hey, you do things for his sake. Hey, I should do this or not do that. If you do it if you go at it for his sake, the power of he is going to help you get through it. You can do it. You can do it. The first step, like that Indiana Jones, that's the first step you make in faith, in hopelessness and faith. You make that step. And when that step hits ground and you get traction, you go, oh, and you're kind of excited on to go forward on it. And it doesn't matter what, I saw somebody, one thing about social media is they come up with these little sentences and all that. And some of them are pretty good in spite of themselves. Whereas whatever you lose, whether it be relationship in your, it's something that is not needed and most likely would even be impair you on your journey. So all things work for good for those who love God and those who listen to his voice and follow. And how do you hear his voice? It's a still small voice. It's inside. You have to be quiet. You have to get rid of distractions from the world. That includes your diet, your video or music, that type of stuff. Your how you spend your time, your drugs or what have you. You have to lose this stuff, clean your stuff. That's why prayer and fasting has been talked about. It's fantastic. You prayer and fast, and things clear out. When you fast, you get rid of all the toxins. I mean, it's not pleasant sometimes, but you get rid of the toxins. You get rid of all that stuff. You get a clear head. And the praying helps to bring forth that spirit that's inside you. It's back there, and bring it forward. And if you do it for his sake, it will work. The question is what you want to be done. A lot of people go to God and say, I want this to happen. Boy, how come God didn't make this happen? Because you want to go to God and say, I want to be the best I could be. I want to be the best that you can use on earth and prepare me for the next life. It will happen. All right, I got to go because I want to keep reiterating and going on and on. So God bless you all. And next week, I'm going to be doing a radio show with The Edge AM. An interview, so you might want to check that out. Look at I'll post information on how you can get it. God bless, and we will see you next time. The Ancient One, my old friend, the one who walked before, the one who will walk again. God bless.
The Ancient One. Oh, my old friend, the one who walked before, the one who walked again, the ancient one of old, with wisdom for the new, revive our inner sight, retell your timeless truths, oh, ancient one. Hey!
Feet to Fire is a production of IPS Media Works on the OnSync Radio network of stations.